The Philippines Campaign, or the Battle of the Philippines, fought the 8th of December 1941 to 8 May 1942, was the invasion of the Philippines by Japan and the defense of the islands by Filipino and United States forces. The defending forces outnumbered the Japanese invaders by 3-2, but were a mixed force of non-combat experienced regular, National Guard, Constabulary, and newly created Commonwealth units. The Japanese used their best first-line troops at the outset of the campaign and concentrated its forces in the first month of the campaign, enabling it to swiftly overrun most of Luzon. The Japanese High Command, believing they had won the campaign, made a strategic decision to advance by a month their timetable of operations in Borneo and Indonesia, withdrawing their best division and the bulk of their air power in early January 1942. This, coupled with the decision of the defenders to withdraw into a defensive holding position in the Bataan Peninsula, enabled the Americans and Filipinos to successfully hold out for 4 more months. Background: Japanese plans. Objectives: the Japanese planned to occupy the Philippines as part of their plan for a Greater East Asia War, in which their Southern Expeditionary Army Group seized sources of raw materials in Malaya and the Netherlands East Indies, while the combined fleet neutralized the United States Pacific Fleet. The Southern Expeditionary Army was created on 6 November 1941, commanded by Gen. Count Hisaichi Terauchi, who had previously been Minister of War. It was ordered to prepare for war in the event that negotiations with the United States did not succeed in peacefully meeting Japanese objectives. Under Terauchi's command were 4 corps equivalent armies, comprising 10 divisions and 3 combined arms brigades, including the 14th Army. Operations against the Philippines and Malaya were to be conducted simultaneously when Imperial General Headquarters ordered. The invasion of the Philippines had 3 objectives: to prevent the use of the Philippines as an advance base of operations by American forces, to acquire staging areas and supply bases to enhance operations against the Netherlands East Indies, to secure the lines of communication between occupied areas in the south and the Japanese home islands. Invasion forces. Terauchi assigned the Philippines invasion to the 14th Army, under the command of Lt. Gen. Masaharu Oma. Air support of ground operations would be provided by the 5th Air Group, under Lt. Gen. Hideyoshi Obata, which was transferred to Formosa from Manchuria. The amphibious invasion would be conducted by the Philippines force under Vice Admiral Ibo Takahashi, using the Imperial Japanese Navy 3rd Fleet, supported by the land-based aircraft of 11th Air Fleet of Vice Admiral Nishizu Sukahara. The 14th Army had 2 first-line infantry divisions, the 16th and 48th Divisions, to invade and conquer Luzon, and the 65th Brigade as a garrison force. The Formosa-based 48th Division, although without combat experience, was considered one of the Japanese Army's best units, was specially trained in amphibious operations, and was given the assignment of the main landing in Lingayen Gulf. The 16th Division, assigned to land at Lamon Bay, was picked as one of the best divisions still available in Japan itself and staged from the Ryukyushin Palau. The 14th Army also had the 4th and 7th Tank Regiments, 5 Field Artillery Battalions, 5 Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalions, 4 anti-tank companies, and a mortar battalion. An unusually strong group of combat engineer and bridging units was included in the 14th Army's support forces. For the invasion, the 3rd Fleet was augmented by 2 destroyer squadrons and a cruiser division of the 2nd Fleet, and the aircraft carrier Ryajor from the 1st Air Fleet. The Philippines force consisted of an aircraft carrier, 5 heavy cruisers, 5 light cruisers, 29 destroyers, 2 seaplane tenders, plus minesweepers and torpedo boats. Combined Army and Navy air strength allocated to support the landings was 541 aircraft. The 11th Kokukinte consisted of the 21st and 23rd Kokuzinte, a combined strength of 156 G4M Betty and G3M Nell bombers, 107 A6M0 fighters, plus seaplanes and reconnaissance planes. Most of these were based at Takaro, and approximately a third were sent to Indochina in the last week of November to support operations in Malaya. The Ryajol provided an additional 16 fighters and 18 torpedo planes, and the surface ships had 68 seaplanes for search and observation, totaling 412 naval aircraft. The Army's 5th Kikoshidan consisted of 2 fighter regiments, 2 light bomber regiments, and a heavy bomber regiment, totaling 192 aircraft. 76 Ki-21, Sally, Ki-48, Lily, and Ki-30, Ann, bombers, 36 Ki-27, Nate, fighters, and 19 Ki-15, Babs, and Ki-36, Ida, observation planes. Defenses USAFFE from mid-1941, following increased tension between Japan and several other powers, including the United States, Britain and the Netherlands. Many countries in Southeast Asia and the Pacific began to prepare for the possibility of war. By December 1941, the Combined Defense Forces in the Philippines were organized into the U.S. Army Forces in the Far East, which eventually included the Philippine Army's 1st Regular Division, 2nd Division, and 10 mobilized reserve divisions, and the United States Army's Philippine Department. General Douglas MacArthur was recalled from retirement by the U.S. War Department and named commander of USAFFE on 26 July 1941. MacArthur had retired in 1937 after 2 years as military advisor to the Philippine Commonwealth, and accepted control of the Philippine Army, tasked by the government of the Philippines with reforming an army made up primarily of reservists lacking equipment, training and organization. On 31 July 1941, the Philippine Department had 22,532 troops assigned, approximately half of whom were Filipino. MacArthur recommended the reassignment of the department commander, Maj. Gen. George Grunit, in October 1941 and took command himself. The main component of the department was the U.S. Army Philippine Division, a 10,500-man formation that consisted mostly of Philippine Scouts combat units. The Philippine Department had been reinforced between August and November 1941 by 8,500 troops of the U.S. Army Air Forces, and by 3 Army National Guard units, including its only armor, 2 battalions of M3 light tanks. These units, the 200th Coastal Artillery Regiment, 192nd Tank Battalion, and 194th Tank Battalion, drew troops from New Mexico, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, Minnesota, Missouri, and California. After reinforcement, the department's strength as of 30 November 1941 was 31,095, including 11,988 Philippine Scouts. MacArthur organized USAFFE into 4 tactical commands. The North Luzon Force, activated 3 December 1941 under Maj. Gen. Jonathan M. Wainwright, defended the most likely sites for amphibious attacks and the central plains of Luzon. Wainwright's forces included the PAR 11th, 21st and 31st Infantry Divisions, the U.S. 26th Cavalry Regiment, a battalion of the 45th Infantry, and the 1st Provisional Artillery Group of 2 batteries of 155 mm guns and 1 2.95-inch mountain gun. The Philippine 71st Infantry Division served as a reserve and could be committed only on the authority of MacArthur. The South Luzon Force, activated 13 December 1941 under Brig. Gen. George M. Parker, Jr., controlled a zone east and south of Manila. The Visayan Mindanao Force under Brig. Gen. William F. Sharp comprised the PAR 61st, 81st, and 101st Infantry Divisions, reinforced after the start of the war by the newly inducted 73rd and 93rd Infantry Regiments. The 61st Division was located on Panay, the 81st on Cebu and Negros, and the 101st on Mindanao. In January, a 4th Division, the 102nd, was created on Mindanao from the field artillery regiments of the 61st and 81st Divisions acting as infantry, and the 103rd Infantry of the 101st Division. The 2nd Infantry of the Philippine Army's 1st Regular Division and the 2nd Battalion of the U.S. 43rd Infantry were also made a part of the Mindanao Force. USAFFE's reserve force, under MacArthur's direct control, was composed of the Philippine Division, the 91st Division, and headquarters units from the PAR and Philippine Department, positioned just north of Manila. The 192nd and 194th Tank Battalions formed the separate Provisional Tank Group, also under MacArthur's direct command, at Clark Field, Fort Stotzenburg, where they were positioned as a mobile defense against any attempt by airborne units to seize the field. 4 U.S. Coastal Artillery regiments guarded the entrance to Manila Bay, including Corregidor Island. Across a narrow 3-kilometer strait of water from Bataan on Corregidor was Fort Mills, defended by batteries of the 59th and 60th Coast Artillery Regiments, and the 91st and 92nd Coast Artillery Regiments of the harbor defenses of Manila and Subic Bays. The 59th CA acted as a supervisory unit for the batteries of all units positioned on Forts Hughes, Drum, Frank, and Wint. The USAFFE's aviation arm was the Far East Air Force of the U.S. Army Air Forces, commanded by Maj. Gen. Lewis H. Breton. Previously, the Philippine Department Air Force and Air Force USAFFE. The Air Force was activated on 16 November 1941 and was the largest USAAF combat air organization outside the United States. Its primary combat power in December 1941 consisted of 91 serviceable P-40 Warhawk fighters and 34 B-17 Flying Fortress bombers, with further modern aircraft en route. Tactically, the FEAF was part of the reserve force, so that it fell under MacArthur's direct command. As of 30 November 1941, the strength of U.S. Army troops in the Philippines, including Philippine units, was 31,095. Consisting of 2,504 officers and 28,591 enlisted. Mobilization. MacArthur's mobilization plans called for induction of the 10 reserve divisions between 1 September and 15 December 1941. The timetable was met on 1 September with the induction of 1 regiment per division, but slowed as a lack of facilities and equipment hampered training. The 2nd regiments of the divisions were not called up until 1 November, and the 3rd regiments were not organized until after hostilities began. Training was also seriously inhibited by language difficulties between the American cadres and the Filipino troops, and by the many differing dialects of the numerous ethnic groups comprising the army. By the outbreak of war, only 2/3 of the army had been mobilized, but additions to the force continued with the induction of the constabulary and a portion of the regular army, until a force of approximately 130,000 men was reached. The most crucial equipment shortfalls were in rifles and divisional light artillery. MacArthur requested 84,500 M1 Garand rifles to replace the World War I M1917 Enfields equipping the PAR, of which there were adequate numbers, but the War Department denied the requests because of production difficulties. The divisions had only 20% of their artillery requirements, and while plans had been approved to significantly reduce this gap, the arrangements came too late to be implemented before war isolated the Philippines. By contrast, the Philippine Division was adequately manned, equipped, and trained. Macarthur received immediate approval to modernize it by reorganizing it as a mobile, triangular division. Increasing the authorized size of the Philippine Scouts was not politically viable, so Macarthur's plan also provided for freeing up Philippine Scouts to round out other units. The transfer of the American 34th Infantry from the 8th Infantry Division in the United States to the Philippine Division, accompanied by 2 field artillery battalions to create a pair of complete regimental combat teams, was actually underway when war broke out. The deployment ended with the troops still in the United States, where they were sent to defend Hawaii instead. Other defense forces, the United States Asiatic Fleet and 16th Naval District, based at Manila, provided the naval defenses for the Philippines. Commanded by Admiral Thomas C. Hart, the surface combatants of the Asiatic Fleet were the heavy cruiser US Houston, the light cruiser US Marblehead, and 13 World War I-era destroyers. Its primary striking power lay in the 23 modern submarines assigned to the Asiatic Fleet. Submarine Squadron 2 consisted of 6 Salmon-class submarines, and SUBRON-5 of 11 Porpoise and Salgo-class submarines. In September 1941, naval patrol forces in the Philippines were augmented by the arrival of the 6 PT boats of Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3. Likewise, the China Yangtze patrol gunboats also became part of the Philippine naval defenses. US Asheville, US Mindanao, US Luzon, US Oahu, and US Quail. In December 1941, the naval forces were augmented by the schooner US Lanakai. The U.S. 4th Marine Regiment, stationed in Shanghai, China, since the late 1920s, had anticipated a withdrawal from China during the summer of 1941. As personnel were routinely transferred back to the United States or separated from the service, the regimental commander, Col. Samuel L. Howard, arranged unofficially for all replacements to be placed in the 1st Special Defense Battalion, based at Cavite. When the 4th Marines arrived in the Philippines on 30 November 1941, it incorporated the Marines at Cavite and Olongapo naval stations into its understrength ranks. An initial plan to divide the 4th into 2 regiments, mixing each with a battalion of Philippine Constabulary, was discarded after Howard showed reluctance, and the 4th was stationed on Corregidor to augment the defenses there, with details detached to Bataan to protect USAFFE headquarters. Additionally, the Coast and Geodetic Survey, a paramilitary survey force, operated in Manila with the ship USC and GSS Pathfinder.